based off a confrontation that I had, and I ended up shooting a young man who, as a result, lose his life. And I ended up being charged with first-degree murder at 16 years old. My son, he was shot and killed. Rolled up on the car, man, and shot him 16 times. They took me in the boiler room. They saying they was gonna kill me, and they beat me. They tied plastic bags around my head. My name is Billy Moore. I'm 55 years old.
All right, so July 6, 2017, what happened?
My son, who was 26 years old, was sitting in the car in the Foster Park area, waiting on a friend to come outside, man. And whoever it was, rolled up on the car, man, and shot him 16 times. And he passed away.
So where were you at when you got that call about your son?
I was literally I was registered for school. I had decided to go back to school. I was going to Northeastern. I was in the financial aid office signing my papers, and my cousin had called me. Her phone called me, and it was her daughter on the phone telling me that my son had just been shot, but they didn't know any of the circumstances or the details surrounding the situation. So I asked them where was it at, and they was like, "I'm gonna call you right back." And he was literally shot 2 blocks from where I grew up at, in the Foster Park area, right? So I had a long way to go to get to him, right? So I just left the school. I'm trying to get, back to the area where he was shot at. So he was shot 16 times sitting in the car. So I get another call maybe about 20 minutes later as I'm en route. And my cousin, she's in tears, and she's telling me that, they putting the tape up around the car. So I asked her, I say, "Is he still in the car?" And she said, "Yeah." So I knew at that time my son had died. So he ended up dying before I got there. And I knew right at that moment, it came full circle of what I had done when I was 16 to Benji and to his family and to the people who loved him, how much grief, that I had caused, because I was feeling that same grief. And I felt like that was kind of like a sacrifice, that I had to feel what I had inflicted.
What did the detectives tell you?
Well, really nothing. His case went unsolved. No one has been arrested. But I guarantee you, within a couple of days, there was speculations, you know what I'm saying, of who was responsible, who did it, why it happened, but no one was ever arrested, no one was ever charged, no one was ever convicted, no one was ever, locked up for it.
All right, bro, can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
So I was born and raised in Chicago on the South Side, Auburn Gresham community around Foster Park. Grew up like most, normal kids, middle class neighborhood. Until a fateful day when I had a confrontation with a young man. I felt like, I had to protect myself. Had it went in a different direction, I may have, ended up, having my gun taken from me, right? And losing my life. So, I did something that pretty much defined the rest of my life. In that one moment when I was 16 years old, I made a decision, and I ended up shooting a young man who will, as a result, lose his life, right? And I ended up being charged with first-degree murder at 16 years old, being sentenced to 40 years in prison. The situation that I was involved in, probably the most sensationalized case in Chicago, and because it involved a young man who at the time was ranked the #1 basketball player in the nation, which was Benji Wilson at Simeon High School.
All right, Billy, what was it like going to prison at 16 years old?
Man, listen, when I tell you that I thought my life was over, the anxiety, the level of stress I've never felt as much as I felt in those moments directly after what happened, leading up to the moment that I was sentenced to 40 years. I had heard a news report the day that I was going to be sentenced that I could get up to 75 years in prison. I was sentenced to 40 years for first degree murder and 10 years for attempted armed robbery. So that's basically 50 years, but they ran it concurrent. Back then, the time that you received, you was rewarded a day for every day you did. So since I got 40 years, every day I did of that 40-year sentence, I was given a day. So I ended up doing 20 straight years. So I went away at 16 years old, and I came home when I was 36. And I just didn't think, man, that I felt like 40 years for me was a life sentence. Literally. I couldn't see, being free again. I was 16 years old, which means that having a 40-year sentence, I was going to have to do more time in prison that I had literally lived on the street.
So did you go straight to juvenile or did you go to the pen?
This was in November of 1984. It was 41 days before my 17th birthday. So I went to the juvenile detention center for those 42 days. The 42nd day, I was transferred to Cook County Jail, Division 6. I was charged as an adult initially, so I was already under, adult adjudication. So they was just waiting for me to turn 17 before I was sent to Cook County Jail. The second day after I was sent to the Cook County Jail, I was being I was pulled off the deck. I was in Division 6. I was pulled off the deck, and by 6 Cook County sheriffs. Right? They asked me what was I in prison, what was I in jail for, and of course everybody knew I was there. And my lawyer had just told me, don't talk about your case, right? So I told my lawyer told me not to talk about my case. They proceeded to jump on me, right? And they pulled me into the captain's office. Long story short, the captain basically gave them the green light to do with me whatever they wanted to do with me. They took me in the boiler room in the basement of Division 6 and told me I was going to write a letter to my mother saying that I couldn't cope. Basically, they saying they was going to kill me, right, and make it look like I committed suicide. But before they pulled me off the wing, my instincts told me something wasn't right about this picture. So I wrote my mother's number down, and I told a guy that was on the deck with me, man, call my mother and tell her to first call my uncle, because I had 2 uncles that worked in the county jail at the time, and tell them what's going on, get to work, and then come out here and find out what's going on with me. So while all this is playing out, while I'm in the boiler room in Division 6, the basement of Division 6, and they beat me and they trying to get me to write. They hit me across the chest with a billy club. They tied plastic bags around my head, hit me in my stomach, telling me I'm gonna write this letter. I'm saying to myself, man, whatever you do, stay strong. You know what I'm saying? You're not writing no letter. So I was able to really, come out on the other end of that, because it felt like, man, I was down there about 4-5 hours, right? I hear the phone ring on the wall by the door, and the racist Cook County sheriff tell me it's your lucky day. You know what I'm saying? You wasn't supposed to walk out this room alive. But I did, right? My mother had came up there. She had called my uncle. My uncle had came to work demanding to see me, you know what I'm saying? And made a big fuss up. After having 17 and a half years in, November 21st, 2001, my mother ended up passing away of cancer 3.5 years before I got out. And that was the one thing that, when I was sentenced to 40 years, I prayed would never happen, that I would lose her, you know what I'm saying, before this ordeal was over. And I ended up losing my mother in prison. And the thing about me losing her 3.5 years before I got out, she stopped coming to see me 3.5 years before that. So I hadn't seen my mother in 7 years, And she told me, I would talk to her all the time on the phone right before she passed, but she would tell me that, you know, I just can't keep coming to see you out here like that. You know what I'm saying? And because she died of cancer, you know, that was the cause of her death. But I always say the real cause is that she died from a broken heart because I was her only child. Coming home, I had to almost like relearn how to live. I had grew up in prison. I had spent more time in prison than I had been alive. So I was able to go to school, give me a CDL license. I got my first job driving trucks. But I went through an organization that was, you know, whose sole purpose was to help returning citizens find employment. So I went through their program. It's called the Safer Foundation. The Safer Foundation helped me tremendously. They helped me get my life back on track. I went through this mentoring program. I was able to get my CDL license that they had paid for. They helped me get my first apartment. And then they helped me get my first job. We worked to reduce gun violence in the city of Chicago on both the south and west sides. I've been working for Iman and now Chicago CRED since 2017 to current, working with young men, trying to get them to think outside of their feelings, trying to get them to understand that, you know, life is very important for those who, you know, look up to them, their children, their families, the community. We're trying to impact the community and reduce gun violence. So that's the work I've been doing since 2017, up until my present, up until current time right now.
City on fire. Ooh, down to the wire. It's my life in the shy. Ooh, it's my life in the shy.